Look at me closely. Bring the light of your lamps closer to my face. What do you see? You see skin as smooth as the marble of Greek statues, the perfect curve of a jawline untouched by the passage of time, and eyes that retain the brilliance of eternal youth. To the world, I am a miracle. To London, I am the young man that time forgot. But while I smile at you in the drawing rooms, there is something devouring me. Upstairs in the attic of this house, behind a door locked with a double bolt and covered by a heavy purple silk tapestry, hides the truth. There, in the darkness, something breathes. Something I created. Do you want to know how a man can keep the purity of an angel while his hands are stained with blood and his spirit fills with worms? It all began 18 years ago, in a garden that smelled of lilac and the arrogance of youth. It wasn't the devil who came looking for me. I was the one who handed him the keys. That summer, the world belonged to me. I was the favorite model of Basil Hallward, a painter with a noble soul who saw in me the perfection that nature so rarely grants. I remember the scent of Lord Henry Wotton's tobacco mingling with the heavy perfume of the roses. Basil was finishing my portrait. It was his masterpiece. Lord Henry, with his velvet voice and his charming cynicism, spoke to me of things I had never considered. He spoke to me of the brevity of beauty.
Dorian, you have a wonderful youth, and youth is the only thing worth having. But one day, your face will be wrinkled, your eyes will sink, and you will be a ghost of the man you are today. Time is jealous of you. It will steal your victories. You will become a puppet of sagging flesh.
His words pierced me like ice needles. I looked at the painting Basil had just finished. It was me, so perfect, so eternal. And then I felt a sharp panic, a terror that squeezed my chest. For the first time, I understood that my beauty was a flower that would wither. It's true. How sad it is. I shall grow old and horrible and dreadful, but this picture will remain always young. It will never be older than this particular day of June. If it were only the other way, if it were I who was to be always young and the picture that was to grow old. For that, I would give my soul for that. Basil was horrified, but Lord Henry only smiled. I didn't know that at that very moment, in that sunlit corner, the universe had heard my plea. The painting became my substitute against time. Shortly after, I met Sybil Vane. She was an actress in a shabby little theater in the slums, but when she stepped onto the stage, the world disappeared. The air smelled of gas, stage dust, and cheap makeup, but to me, she was the embodiment of beauty. I loved her because she wasn't a woman. She was Juliet. She was Ophelia. She was Rosalind. I loved her because she was art. One night, I invited Basil and Henry to see her. I wanted to show them that my soul was as pure as my face. But Sybil acted poorly, without passion. Her words were cold. When it was over, I went to find her backstage, furious. She looked at me with a radiant smile.
Dorian, don't you understand? Before I knew you, acting was the one reality of my life. But now that I know what true love is, those shadows on the stage mean nothing to me anymore. I can't act anymore. I am free from art because I have you.
I felt a deep nausea. Her reality seemed vulgar to me. You have killed my love. You used to be an artist. You inspired my imagination. Now you are nothing. You are just a pretty woman with an ordinary voice and a boring heart. You have disappointed me, Sybil. I don't want to see you ever again. You are a stain on my world. I left her crying on the dirty floor of the theater. Her sobs were like the scraping of a broken violin. I felt no pity. I felt as though I had been robbed of a jewel and given a piece of coal in its place. I returned home at dawn. London was shrouded in a fog that looked like dirty cotton. As I entered my library, the moonlight struck the portrait. I stopped dead in my tracks. My hands began to sweat. Something had altered in the canvas. I stepped closer, rubbing my eyes. The expression of my face in the oil painting was different. There was a touch of cruelty in the mouth that hadn't been there before. A bitter crease. A shadow of contempt that warped the perfection of my painted lips. The picture looked back at me with an expression of wicked triumph. Was it a hallucination? No. The portrait had recorded my treatment of Sybil. It had absorbed my first moral stain. Fear washed over me, but also a morbid fascination. I covered the painting with a heavy purple silk cloth and locked it in the attic, the place where I kept my old childhood toys. From that day on, the attic became the secret diary of my degradation. That morning, regret was a physical burden. I wrote a letter to Sybil, a plea for forgiveness filled with promises of marriage and redemption. I believed I could save myself, that my soul could still be clean as my face. But then Henry arrived, and with a single whisper, he shattered the glass of my fantasy.
Write to her no more, Dorian. Sybil Vane is dead. She committed suicide last night at the theater.
The world stopped. A dreadful chill ran down my spine. I saw myself as a monster, a predator who had torn apart a being of light simply out of boredom. Henry, tell me, am I a beast? Am I a heartless monster? I have murdered Sybil Vane. I expected Henry to punish me, to scream my sin at me. But he only smiled, with that cynical calm that enveloped him completely. He spoke to me of art, of Greek tragedies. He convinced me that Sybil was not a woman, but a character who had played her final act.
Don't be vulgar, Dorian. She died for love. She has done the supreme thing. She has passed from fiction into the eternity of art. Is it not beautiful?
His words were a sweet poison. Listening to him, my horror turned into fascination. The guilt was not erased. It simply transformed into something aesthetic, something I could admire from afar. You are right, Henry. It has been a marvelous tragedy. The pain has passed. At what time will you pick me up for the opera? The years passed, but my face in the mirror remained that of a 20-year-old boy. While the world around me aged, while my friends lost their hair and their skin grew spotted, I remained the ideal of London beauty. But my life became a frantic search for forbidden sensations. Lord Henry gave me a yellow-bound book, a story of a young Parisian who devoted his life to the darkest pleasures. And that book became my Bible. I immersed myself in the study of jewels, perfumes, and tapestries. But soon, that wasn't enough. I began to frequent the lowest slums of London, where the air smells of opium and despair. In the opium dens of Bluegate Fields, surrounded by thieves and prostitutes, I found the only peace possible: oblivion. I corrupted young men from the best families. I took them to private parties where vice had no limits, and months later, their names would appear in obituaries, or they would be expelled from their clubs for unspeakable scandals. One of them shot himself in a seedy hotel. Another fled to America with a ruined reputation. I was the common denominator of all those ruins, but no one suspected me. How could a man with the face of an angel be evil? Sometimes, after a night of excesses, I would return home, lock the attic door, and lift the veil that covered the portrait. It was a ritual of horror. The young man on the canvas no longer existed. In his place, there was a being whose skin looked scaly, with eyes that gleamed with an inhuman malice. The hands in the picture began to look wet, as if they were stained with real blood. The hair grew thinning, the teeth yellowed and sharp. Every sin added a layer of rot. The painting wasn't just old anymore. It was a creature from hell. One November night, shortly before my 38th birthday, I ran into Basil Hallward in the rain. He was moving to Paris and wanted to say goodbye. He was troubled by the rumors circulating about my wickedness. We went into my house. Basil, with that unbearable goodness, began to question me in the library.
Dorian, people say dreadful things about you. They say you corrupt everyone you touch. They say you are a soulless monster. I would like to believe they are lies, but for that, I would have to see your soul.
I felt a volcanic rage. The guilt of so many years erupted in my chest. You want to see my soul, Basil? Come with me. I will show it to you. You created it yourself. Come see the diary of my life. I took him to the attic. It was bone-chillingly cold. I tore the veil off the painting. Basil let out a cry that froze my blood. He staggered back, covering his mouth.
My God, Dorian, what is this? This face is the devil's. I can see your likeness in it, but it is deformed by horror. There is blood on those hands. What have you done? We must repent, Dorian. Let us pray together.
It's too late for praying, Basil. Look at what you have done to me. You gave me this mirror. You made me love my beauty above all else. You are to blame for my ruin. An uncontrollable hatred for him seized me. I saw a knife I used to cut ropes lying on a trunk. Without thinking, I threw myself at him with the force of a wild animal. I drove the knife into his neck. Once, twice, 3 times. I heard the gurgling of blood hitting the floor, a rhythmic sound, almost musical in the solitude of the attic. Basil died at the feet of his masterpiece. I wiped the knife on my silk handkerchief and went downstairs to sleep. The next day, I summoned a man who asked no questions and dissolved what remained of Basil in acid. He simply vanished from the world. But the portrait knew. A new layer of rot had crept across the canvas, a testament to what I had done. After Basil's death, paranoia became my only shadow. I tried to be good. I spared a young country girl I had intended to seduce, thinking that this act of goodness would cleanse the painting. I ran to the attic, hoping to see an improvement on the canvas, but when I lifted the cloth, the horror was absolute. The picture had not improved. On the contrary, there was now a new stain of bright red blood on the hand, and hypocrisy could be read in its eyes. I realized that my goodness was merely vanity, an attempt to save myself, not an act of love. I looked at myself in the hand mirror. My face was still perfect. I loathed that perfection. I hated my beauty because it only served to hide the monster that I could no longer bear to live as. This picture is my conscience. It is the witness of all that I am. If I destroy it, I shall be free. If the canvas dies, the past will die with it. I no longer want to be eternal. Art has consumed me. I want to rest. I grabbed the same knife with which I had murdered Basil. The steel flashed under the candlelight. I stared at the hateful eyes of the portrait, those eyes that judged me from the shadows. Damn you for reminding me what I am. Damn the day you were painted. I will end this right now. With a cry that tore through the silence of the night, I plunged the knife with all my might into the heart of the man in the painting. When the servants entered the room after hearing a dreadful cry, they found something no one could explain. Hanging upon the wall was a splendid portrait of their master, the young Dorian Gray, in all the wonder of his exquisite youth and beauty, with a pure smile and eyes that promised a bright future. But on the floor, lying on the carpet, was the dead body of an old man. He had a face wrinkled like burnt parchment, skin covered in liver spots, and a nauseating expression of pure evil. He was dressed in evening clothes, but his flesh seemed rotten from the inside. He had a knife driven into his heart. It was not till they had examined the rings on his withered skeletal fingers that they recognized who it was. Time, at last, had claimed its debt.